everybody. We are out virtually at the campaign trail once again, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Daniel Miller. He's a Republican candidate on the lieutenant governor's primary election ballot. And welcome. You're talking to folks around Uvalde, Uvalde City and the county. So how you doing? How's your race going?
I'm great, and hello Uvalde, and the race is great. We're crisscrossing all over Texas in the amount of time that we can. Dalhart to Del Rio and El Paso to Orange and all points in between, taking our campaign message to the people of Texas.
Okay, tell us a little about the lieutenant governor's office. I'll just start off by saying I was surprised to find out that it is one of the most powerful, aside from the governor, it's one of the most powerful offices in the state government, and because you're kind of the person that has that role, can decide what bills and business gets put in front of the legislature. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, historically, the lieutenant governor's position has been the most powerful constitutional position in Texas. That goes back to the, Constitution of 1876, when there was a constitutional convention to write the Constitution that we have right now. And, coming out of the Civil War and particularly Reconstruction and the post-Reconstruction era, the governor had an immense amount of power coming out of Reconstruction, and it created a major sort of incident where the governor kind of went out of control. The people were pretty unhappy about it. So when they were able to get him out of office and have the constitutional convention, one of the things that they did was give Texas a weak governor, but a strong lieutenant governor. And honestly, that's been, I think, one of the biggest criticisms of the current lieutenant governor is that over the years, they have ceded more and more legislative authority to the governor to operate under executive orders and emergency mandates. So, that oddly enough, I didn't think we would ever be in a position in Texas where we would be talking about how the lieutenant governor position has become too weak. But
okay, so let me ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself, how you found yourself saying, I want to run for this position, and what are some of the really main points or your issues you're really running strong on? I know. I'll just let you talk. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, look, a little about me first, and then we'll talk about how I wound up where I'm at now. I'm a sixth generation Texan. My ancestry in Texas goes all the way back to the Battle of San Jacinto. My first ancestor here fought at the Battle of San Jacinto in the Texian Army to kick a tyrant out of Texas after it declared its independence. So, having a bit of an independent streak and standing up to authority just runs deep in my blood. But I'm also a husband. I'm a father of 6 children, one currently in the U.S. Army. I am, by trade, I'm a technology consultant, consulting primarily with small to medium-sized businesses and startups. That's okay. Really where my wheelhouse is. But since 2005, I've been president of an organization that many people may have heard of called the Texas Nationalist Movement. If you've heard the word Texit bannered about, particularly post-Brexit vote,
right.
That's in fact, I wrote a 4-time best-selling book on the issue of Texit. So, from that role has, as far as founding the TNM, we were able to grow that organization to become the single largest political advocacy organization in Texas outside of the 2 major political parties. And through that advocacy, through the TNM, not just on Texit, but a whole host of economic, political, and cultural issues related to Texas independence. That's taken me through some pretty difficult fights in the Texas legislature. My first time to testify in front of a legislative committee was 2009, and I haven't stopped going and working there ever since. So, one of the things that has become abundantly clear over the years is there is always a cluster of good guys, but there is a real leadership problem in Texas where there is a major disconnect between those that lead in the legislative body and those that put them in office. And so round about the beginning of the year, 2021, State Representative Kyle Biederman filed a piece of legislation that I had written called the Texas Independence Referendum Act.
Mm.
And in the process of going out on the road, speaking to overflow crowds all over Texas about that piece of legislation and really a lot of other Texas issues, uh, people during the Q&A, people kept asking if I would run against Dan Patrick for the office of Lieutenant Governor.
Right.
And, point number one, that is weirdly specific. Okay.
Yeah, no, that is weirdly specific.
Yeah, I thought so too. And number two, it never stopped, and it just kept getting asked over and over and over. And so, running for public office was never really in my game plan. Right. I've had enough on my plate.
Mhm.
And I'm really satisfied with the advocacy work that we're doing. Although I wish that the electeds were more receptive to the issues of the Texas voters. But I had run for office previously. I ran for mayor of my hometown of White Oak up in Northeast Texas when I was 18. I ran for state representative in 2012 as part of a slate of candidates. Our organization was tapped to be part of a coalition to recruit conservative candidates to run at some of these guys that are, again, not receptive. And I never ask anyone to do anything that I haven't done myself. So I threw my hat in the ring. But holding public office, not really in my game plan, but it just became this incessant call for me to serve. And so that really culminated in, I guess it was September, October, with an open letter that was signed by tons of conservative grassroots organizations, Republican precinct chairs, county chairs, and I believe that even the chair of Republican Party's Legislative Priorities Committee also signed off on it. But it was simply an ask to say, look, you've served Texas since, and this goes back to sort of my line in the sand moment, August 24th, 1996. They said, you've served Texas for 25 years. You don't compromise. You don't quit. You stand up and you champion what is right. You know the Constitution, and we want you to run for lieutenant governor because we're afraid that the onslaught from the federal government, the vaccine mandates, the lockdowns. I mean, you go through this whole, the border issues. You go through all those issues, and they say, we don't believe that the leadership in Austin is strong enough to stand up and fix these things. And so we would like for you to run for lieutenant governor. And, when you get called out in an open letter like that, I mean, and you've got in your entire history and fiber of your being, your entire adult life has been serving Texas on these issues. This has been since August 24th, 1996. It has been the entirety of my adult life to uphold those words in Article 1, Section 1 of the Texas Constitution, which says Texas is a free and independent state, and to support Article 1, Section 2, which says that all political power is inherent in the people. And so I will do everything I can to see those carried out to their fullest extent, or until the gravedigger pats me in the face with a shovel, whichever comes first.
Right. No, I get that. No, I was just going to the Texit, but going on from that, I mean,
we can cover Texit if you want.
No, we could. No, I'd like to talk about it a little bit, but just sort of limited on times and everything. But I do want to just say this, coming from a citizen point of view, coming from somebody that lives in the Uvalde County area, which is some people say a border town. It's within an hour of the border, but we're on that main thoroughfare. We have experienced the brunt of a lot of the illegal immigration, trespassing on lands, high-speed chases. All of that's happened in Uvalde. Our mayor has been on Fox News nationally, and John McLaughlin. And so it is a real national issue that's come home to roost, so to speak. So I've given you a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and look, that's a lot to consume, but here's the thing about it. Out of the lieutenant governor candidates, including the incumbent, Dan Patrick, I'm the only candidate who has released a comprehensive border security plan with very concrete action items that need to be done legislatively, that include not only placing the wall in places where it makes sense, but as a differentiation between all of this rhetoric, I have proposed doing what we've proposed since 2012, which is shifting the majority of that couple $1 billion plus budget over into fully militarizing the Texas State Guard, dramatically expanding enlistment, prioritizing prior service military, and then deploying them as a border protection force. Because right now, I mean, look, Operation Lone Star, Greg Abbott, Dan Patrick can go around touting that, but it would be more appropriately titled Operation Chupacabra, because look, there are people who swear that they've seen it, and when they describe it, it sounds terrifying, but in reality doesn't exist, right? So, there is beyond the securing of the border. I've talked about very specific policy positions related to ending the magnets, designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, going after their assets and anything that they've touched, which would dramatically decrease the challenges that we have with sex trafficking and human trafficking. But also, I suggested that when we do fully militarize the state guard, because they cannot be federalized, is that we give them clear rules of engagement, which means that when the cartels fire upon them, they have the ability to return fire and then give pursuit and neutralize the source of it. And whether that's on this side of the river, the other side of the river is irrelevant to us, because when cross-border fire happens, that is an international incident. And any country that's worth its salt that would protect its sovereignty would do exactly the same thing. And we fully have the authority to do this under the Texas Constitution, because the one thing that has to be done is the border issue has to be declared an invasion. When they put 10,000 troops on the border, when Russia puts 10,000 troops on the border of Ukraine, and the United States federal government calls it an invasion, what do you call 165,000 illegal crossings aided by the cartels and facilitated by the federal government that happen every single solitary month? You put that in perspective. There were 165,000 Allied troops that landed on the beaches of Normandy on D-Day, and that was an invasion.
Right.
We have many illegal aliens aided by the cartels crossing the Mexico border into Texas every single solitary month.
And they're getting paid to do that too. People are paying them to help them get across as well.
Well, sure. The federal government is actually taking our taxpayer money, distributing it through NGOs, and handing it out to those people that successfully make it across, who then give the cartels a cut. So our taxpayer money, our federal taxpayer money, is being utilized to subsidize human trafficking and illegal immigration. And to make it worse, is the National Guard that's deployed down there are pretty much helpless to do anything about it. They have been relegated to becoming an Uber service for illegal aliens, to get them to processing and then to get them to the airports.
Let me kind of cut to the race a little bit. I was looking at the race, and from a voter's point of view, you've got a number of candidates on the Republican side. You have, I think, 4 on the Democratic side. And I was doing some research, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but my first, I guess, pessimistic view is it's like, well, the incumbents, they're very hard to beat. And I think a lot of people on post like, well, what's the use voting for some of the other folks? But then I started reading just kind of some of the forecasts. I guess it said that it could really be up. It could really change. I mean, there could, at the very least, be a runoff. There's a high probability there could be a runoff, which would really be a big deal. And so tell me a little bit about that, what you're hoping to see. And to the voters, it's like, well, is it worth my while voting for who I want to vote for? Dan Patrick, is he just a slam dunk guy? Anyway.
Yeah, look, here's the bottom line. We know that the Secretary of State's office is instructing election officials to expect a runoff to be with almost 100% certainty in 3 statewide races: the governor's race, the lieutenant governor's race, and the attorney general's race. So, the fact that the Secretary of State's office is prepping for a runoff in all 3 of those ought to tell you something. But we also know that even in, from internal polling that's been done, not just through our campaign, but even through some others, we know that Dan Patrick is below 50%, which means runoff. And then additionally, even in the mainstream, these kind of really inaccurate polls, as we saw in 2016, they're still showing Dan Patrick at 52%, and those things have a tendency to skew way higher for incumbents, as inaccurate as they are. So with him just at 52% in some of those polls ought to tell you that he's in serious trouble. Here's another indication for you. The fact that he went out and begged Trump to come to Conroe to bolster him, the fact that Dan Patrick, that Dan Patrick is running a flight of statewide television ads. People that are running away with it don't spend millions of dollars for statewide TV buys.
Yeah,
And
it's a
so,
follow the money kind of situation.
sure,
So, yeah,
sure.
see,
So, look, yeah, Patrick knows he's in trouble. But beyond that, I think really to what your point is this: in the primary, people should absolutely get out and vote their conscience, vote their principles, vote their values. Because at the end of the day, whoever comes out of that primary is going to wind up facing off in the general election. And this is especially true for Republicans. And one thing we know beyond a shadow of a doubt is that Dan Patrick, despite his campaign rhetoric and his broken campaign promises, carries a lot of baggage into the general election. We know the Democrats are going to dig up everything that we have on how he and Abbott let the grid fail, and how they did that through Chapter 313 subsidies, right?
right.
They're going to run. They're going to be relentless. And what we need to think about, specifically Republican voters, is number one, who's going to go up and stand up for you? Who's going to fight for you? But number two, who can enter that race with the Democrats with absolutely no baggage, that can go in there and just absolutely dominate those guys that stand up for principles. Part of the challenge that Republican voters have had with their leadership for a long time, both Abbott and Patrick and many others, is that they are campaign conservatives, but when it comes to government, they can't deliver. And that's really, I think, part and parcel of the frustration that we're seeing out here on the campaign trail right now, is that the Republican voters of Texas do not believe that Patrick is listening to them. When he can't utilize the most constitutionally powerful office in Texas to even get the 8 legislative priorities of the Republican Party done, then how effective can he possibly be?
We're talking with Daniel Miller, and he is a Republican primary candidate on the Texas lieutenant governor's race. Okay, I got that right. And so what do you have to say? Parting words.
Yeah. So look, I'll leave you with, and the people there in Uvalde, with what we're telling people everywhere, which is I firmly believe the next 100 years of Texas history are being written over the coming weeks and months. I believe that we all understand that Texas is under assault, both from a federal government without and weak establishment politicians within. And so we have a choice. We have a very clear choice, probably more clear than it has ever been. On one side of this line are folks that do not want to secure the border, that want to continue the status quo, that want to continue taxing you out of your home through that immoral property tax, that have no problem with shutting down your church, shutting down your businesses, declaring you essential or non-essential. That's one side of it. But on the other side of this is a candidate like myself who will absolutely go out there, that has a clear plan of action to secure the border, that will absolutely begin the process of abolishing the immoral property tax, that will never stand silently by if a governor gets out of control and locks Texas down, and will absolutely punish businesses that fire you because you will not take the jab. So that next 100 years of Texas history being written right now is important. And the question is, how do you want that future to be written? Because if we don't write it now, we're saying that we're going to let someone else write it for us. So I would appreciate your prayers, your support, your vote. And for anyone who wants any additional information, you can find it at texansformiller.com.
Okay, we were speaking with Daniel Miller. Good luck on the campaign trail, and exciting race. So thank you.
You can't say no.